History laid the foundation
that informs our conversation. Welcome to the classroom.
From the church to the streets, and even in the suites, and all around the world. I'm gonna keep it real in the classroom.
Fannie Lou's classroom. Fannie Lou's classroom. Fannie Lou's classroom.
Welcome to another episode of Fannie Lou's Classroom, where we're super excited to keep the conversations going. We've had a powerful start to season 6, and I'm really excited about our conversation on today. We have two amazing human beings that are going to really have a good conversation around where we currently are in this moment and what we might think about what we need to be doing in this moment. We probably won't share everything because everything is not for public consumption, but we do want to share some things that we all can find ways in which we can enter into the work that we are certainly being called to do in this moment. So let me just jump right here. Well, hold on. I forgot. I got to give a shout out to the FLC team to make this thing happen from week to week. I almost forgot. I was getting excited. So I want to shout out Brooke, who is our engineer up in here, who keeps all things together. Then Cheryl, of course, handles, y'all know Cheryl very well. She handled you up until this moment. Very thorough, making sure you were good to go and that we were good to go. And then Ashley handles all of our social media. She's upped our social media game. So we thank Ash for all of her hard work when it comes to the classroom. So our first guest is my brother, the Reverend Dr. Earle Fisher, Ph.D. He is a public theologian, an author, a pastor, professor, and a civic leader whose work stands at the convergence of Black faith, prophetic tradition, and grassroots activism. With a deep commitment to liberation and justice, Dr. Fisher has spent 2 decades challenging systemic oppression and building sustainable, people-centered power, especially for Black communities across the country. He serves as a senior pastor of Abyssinian Baptist Church in Memphis, Tennessee, affectionately known as the Blackest Church in Memphis and Shelby County. Under his leadership, Abyssinian has become a spiritual and social hub committed to radical inclusion, theological integrity, and unapologetic Blackness. Dr. Fisher is the founder of Up the Vote 901, a nonpartisan voter engagement initiative that equips historically disenfranchised communities with tools for civic engagement and electoral participation. His organizing efforts have helped register hundreds of voters and shift the conversation around Black political power in Memphis and beyond. Whether from the pulpit, the classroom, or the streets, Dr. Fisher remains steadfast in the sacred calling to help set the captives free. Let's shout out and give it up for the Reverend Dr. Earle Fisher, Ph.D.
Hey. Good to be here. Thank you, sister.
And then we have Sister Charlene Walker. Charlene Walker is a visionary leader, faith-based organizer, and woman of faith dedicated to justice and collective liberation. As executive director of Faith in New Jersey, she builds statewide, multiracial, co-governing power through the lens of Black liberation, securing policy victories that have freed incarcerated loved ones, expanded health care, and reduced gun violence. A proud Jersey girl, adoptee, and Black radical, Charlene trains organizers, faith leaders, and community members to walk in their inherent power. She is also co-founder of Harriet's Legacy, a Northeast Black liberation collective. Come on. Uniting 4 Black-led, faith-based organizations across 4 states to advance regional liberation. She leads Audacity to Change, LLC, and serves on key coalitions advancing immigrant justice, voting rights, economic equity. Recognized as a top policymaker, Charlene's leadership continues to shape a more and just liberated world. Let's give it up for Sister Charlene Walker. Come on, let's give it up to the Black woman.
Yay! So great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yes, I'm so excited about today. So I'm going to let you and Dr. Fisher do all the talking here because you all are so amazing. And we want to grab all that we can while you're here. So I want to jump in. Some of this conversation started before we went live. And I think it's important I always tell people we're more than the work that we do. that we are humans, and the type of work that we does can have a toll on us, right? Based on what we witness and that the wickedness, right? I tell people in high places is manifested through people here on earth that we see consistently, right? So I just want to ask the question, how are y'all doing?
That's a trick question. Go ahead, Charlene. You want to go first?
Oh my goodness, I'm trying to not be in the place of just surviving. I'm trying to be in the place of really um, focused on being grounded and being guided by spirit too.
Mm-hmm.
So that not only can I do this work, but I can be whole in the middle of it. Um, and with joy, right? I think so many people forget that joy is something that we should, you know, have around us at all times. So I'm just really trying to
Yeah,
find the midst of everything, no matter how small it is.
right.
Yeah, I think, I echo that, of course. You always want to try to center joy in the thrust of the slings and arrows of outrageous misfortune, I think is what, I don't know if that was Howard Thurman who called it that. But in a lot of ways, it could be like the best of times and the worst of times. I'm sure
Mm.
Charlene, you too, Danielle, are suffering from some form of compassion fatigue because it's hard to carry
Yeah.
the weight of all that is on our shoulders in this very extreme, tense, ubiquitous, complicated, and convoluted moment. And then at the same time, these are the moments that we are shaped and forged for. And so these are the moments that give the work that we do so much more meaning and impact. And so it's like the best of times and the worst of times, and you just try to keep your head above water and make a wave if you can.
Now, see, you dipping into last week episode around we did with economic justice with Dr. Green, Michael Green. But and part of it is I was reading Daniel the other night, the Hebrew boys, right? Because you said thrown in the fire, and I feel it is in light of the social political climate. It's almost that we have to be like them. That we are not going to bow down and give over and give up and give into what is happening. And even if God does not do for us what we want God to do in this moment, we still not going to give up and give in, right? Because it's a lot. And I tell people that's why I always like to ask, stop, do a check in, because we do so much and it's constant. So it's not like you have, we're not accountants where it's an up season and a down season. For us, it's nonstop. And in this administration, it's going to be that continuously, right? So it's always, how do we do self care in the midst of all of this and not feel guilty? About caring for ourselves as well if we have to step away. So I just wanted to check in because now I want to talk about all that's going on and how we might be able to not only interpret what is going on, because there's a lot of disinformation, misinformation, apathy. There's so much working against, what we're trying to do. How do we really move it out to the masses as it relates to really sounding the alarm, creating a different echo chamber so people can really understand and see and hear what's going on. So I want to do this because it's, I have family. I'm from Memphis. My mother still lives there. My brother, I have family and friends still there. So, Reverend, talk to us about what is really going on the ground, because a lot of folks are looking at just TV. So obviously, we may not be getting the full picture and really understanding the weight that is happening on the streets in Memphis with the National Guard being there.
Yeah, and so technically, as I'm speaking right now, when we are doing this, the National Guard, like the troops in and of themselves, are not here in mass, but they have a command staff that's here. And then there's been some talk over the last couple of weeks, actually, about when they're gonna come and how they're gonna come. And there's not a lot of details. And so, as you talk about the information that is going out there or the misinformation campaign, we're stuck in a particular kind of cycle where there are some local news outlets that are covering what they have called from the White House the Memphis Safe Task Force, which allegedly was supposed to come and really target a bunch of violent crimes, but has been manifested with a lot of saturation in some black communities and doing a bunch of traffic stops and end up getting like a bunch of low level stuff. But then they'll parade around the number of arrests. They won't really disaggregate the data. And so you got people who are frustrated by what they have seen and what they are experiencing. Then you got some people who are kind of like applauding the narrative around it because they believe that it has actually made Memphis and Shelby County safer. And then you got a group of people that I find very peculiar because they would have been the ones kind of cheering on this before it actually hit the ground. But it's because they were thinking that it would be a group of rambunctious young Negroes on one side of town that would be targeted. And now they are realizing that we are those Negroes that are being targeted. And yes, all of us
Right.
are suffering from the impact of it. And so it's kind of complicated when you start talking about the way that the narrative is shaping and moving, and even the impact that it is having and the way that people are responding to it. So it does make those of us who are trying to be prophetic in our posture all the
Mm-hmm.
more valuable because we're trying to give the people the truth in context. And so we're up against, a mainstream kind of media apparatus. We're up against what one writer calls the punishment bureaucracy in a book called Propaganda, because that's all around in terms of whether or not the best thing to do to deal with crime and violence in communities like Memphis is to actually give us resources or just police us to death. So I do think we are living into what Michelle Alexander is probably going to call the
Mm.
newest Jim Crow,
Yeah.
and it's a mass incarceration campaign 3.0.
Yeah. So, in terms of folks who are on the ground there in Memphis, what's more like the spirit of the people? I know you see some people are saying, "Oh, I feel safer," but I'm just wondering, as people are moving about, right?
Hmm.
Are people really like, well, "Okay, am I going to stop today?" Is there a heightened sense of anxiety behind not knowing what could happen to them just moving around the city?
Yeah, I mean, we are clearly in an occupied
Mm.
territory, and I think we feel the energy around that. Even those who are trying to find some kind of way to like celebrate, well, it does seem like it's quieter, or it's not as many homicides, and we still got a kind of small sample size because this whole quote unquote task force has really only been implemented in the last almost 2 weeks now. And when it was
Mm.
rolled out, the governor, nor the U.S. Marshals, nor the district attorney's office, the AG, the Department of Justice, gave us any really concrete details on what they were going to do. And they're kind of like fixing the plane in flight and then shaping the narrative as
Mm.
they go along. If you start talking about activists and organizers and faith leaders who got some political and prophetic consciousness, I think we're trying to figure out our strategies to respond in ways to keep our people safe and informed. And then we're trying to measure like exactly how long they're going to be here.
Yeah.
Is it a way to kind of exploit their presence to amplify issues that are most important to us? And can we kind of strangle some long-term solutions out of this? And so we're still in that like strategy phase. There have been a couple of
Mm-hmm.
protests that popped up here and there. But right now, because we don't have the information that we adequately need to do something extravagant and elaborate, I think people are just trying to, kind of like it's like filling out your opponent in the first few rounds of a boxing match. So I think that's where we are right now.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So, um, Sister Charlene, I want because I follow both of you on social media, of course. And so you said something in your post the other day that I really want you to unpack a little bit more. And you talked about MAGA Democrats.
Oh Lord. Oh my goodness. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, um, all right, so I'm just actually going to rewind. Remember when the internet was young and there was no real security? That's when I was in college. And one of the things I was studying was African American studies. So I'm in computers at the time. And I'm perusing the internet. And as I'm doing it, I decided, let's go see if any of these hate groups have internet. And yes, they did. They had open web pages at the time. And the thing that stuck with me when I was like 19 years old, sitting in this computer lab at Syracuse University, was the fact that they put, what can you do for the cause? You can become a lawyer, a politician, a
Mm.
law enforcement, this, and they named all of the things, even doctors, and lay low, and then the time will happen when you will be called.
Mm.
And as I think about the political landscape and how hard it is sometimes to move bills, even though this person claims
Yeah.
to be on our side, right? There's always something, there's always this gatekeeper or something that's happening. And now we are starting to see in New Jersey where people have come out and now they're like, you know what? I'm a Republican now, but they were a diehard Democrat to begin with. Like we have a member of Congress who did that. If you look at, I know everybody saw when Mayor Ras Baraka was arrested, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I was there for that. And like you can see my arm in some of the videos. Um, but they went after Congresswoman LaMonica McIver, and we
Right.
should lift up the fact that it's because she's a Black woman. She thinks people
Right.
think they're gonna leave her out to dry, right? But the person who held the hearing in DC, which we went to, was someone who at one point had been a Democrat and now he's full on MAGA as a member of Congress. It's Congressman Van Drew. So
Mm.
I am predicting that we will see a lot more people start to show their hand the more comfortable that folks get. Like New Jersey has a governor's election that will decide whether or not we are a Republican state going forward. And I think that we're going to see these flips constantly happening.
Mm-hmm.
So it's more important than ever for us to be building political power and being really clear about what we want.
And I wanted you to unpack that because let me just kind of bring this to Texas, right? In terms of the congressional maps that were passed here in the state, and now three panel judges hearing that this week through next week in El Paso. And part of what we've been talking about here was what does it really mean to build Black political power in light of the cracking and packing that's going to happen if these maps stand. And then how do we go about building that power when we clearly see some of those you thought were allies really the whole time we're looking at waiting on the maps to now they're going to run for office in the district that used to be, held by a Black elected official. They're now going to run for that office. And then obviously their policy agenda is going to be, diametrically opposed to our ability to not just survive, but to thrive. And so I wanted you to talk about that so people can not just look at someone that says they're Democrat and we just feel like they're all in. Like we have to do more deep work and understand who we're really supporting and how do we really understand their politics and their ideology really in a real sense so that we can be more informed and really know who we're dealing with and how we might move with them.
Exactly. And I just want to say that goes to actually understanding power, right? Like we need to sit down and actually figure out who's in power.
Mm-hmm.
9 times out of 10 is not that figurehead politician, right? Power is almost always hidden. And we have to do the legwork of finding out who is steering that person that is that figurehead, who's their top donor, who are the people that they care about, who are the people that they're showing up for, to get more clarity, because right now people aren't even being careful about hiding who
Right.
is pulling their strings anymore. And I think that will help to people to understand like what is that they actually need to build, and that's relative to the person that really has power.
Dr. Ayers, can I
Yes.
jump in
Yes,
for a
please
second? Because
do.
this is a fascinating and insightful kind of arena for us to discuss. Because Charlene, Dr. Ayers, tell me what you think about the Democrats in the House that signed the Charlie Kirk resolution, for instance, right? Because would they fit in kind of like that MAGA framework? I was having a conversation with one of my community members and partners earlier today, and he was kind of asking me like how I see the quote unquote Democratic Party, like what kind of Democrats are out there. And I said, you got some I think that would identify as kind of like the left radical extremists, if you will, maybe a AOC, for instance. And then a little bit further to the right of her, you would have like some of the true progressives, let's just say Elizabeth Warren. And then you will have some of the kind of like establishment Democrats who might posture or front face
Mm-hmm.
like progressives, but are much more almost like the conventional run of the mill Democrats. Let's just say Hakeem Jeffries, Chuck Schumer or something like that. And then you got those who would be identified as like Democrats in name only, or those kind of right, like center right folks who have been aligned with the Democratic Party for a long time, like Senator Manchin used to be before
Right.
he resigned. And so I'm thinking about it in that way, and I'm curious if Charlene or Dr. Ayers, if this kind of fits within this notion. Where do these MAGA kind of Democrats fit in that framework?
Yeah, so Charlene, I'm gonna let you go first. This is your kind of framing that you did around the MAGA Democrats, and then I will comment.
Well, one, I don't think we have a left in the Democratic Party at all. like I don't think it actually exists. Everyone is like, oh well, AOC, the group of people that are all moving together. But honestly,
Squad. Yeah.
the squad, right?
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, I think they're more center than anything else. Like there are people that could go far, 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 much further left, right? What I think is that we have those that voted for the Charlie Kirk resolution, right? I think that they were making a calculation. and
Mm-hmm.
everything is always about power, right?
Mhm.
So they were making a calculation of what is going to help me to maintain my power. Like some of them, I don't think they cared not one way or the other, but they did a calculation and say this is what's going to keep me in power because these people are voting for me. Now, whether or not
Mm-hmm.
they're aligned with those positions or not is a whole nother thing. Because that's the way politicians oftentimes make decisions like that. And a lot are getting backlash. And I actually think that that's something that we should be doing, especially faith communities, should be lifting up the narrative that you have to be also be morally sound. You can't just do things just because you think this is going to help you to maintain a seat,
Mm-hmm.
especially when it's a seat that you're probably not even doing what the people need anyway.
Correct.
It's like, so I think that that's kind of where it is. A lot of people, and let's be clear, a lot of folks, remember, have fallen for this white Christian nationalism,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and they actually think that that might be faith. They can put a bow on it. They can rationalize it, right? And I think that that means that right now, I don't think we get out of anything that's happening right now without a faith narrative that is bold, that is loud, and reclaims what it means to be people of faith. And
Mm-hmm.
that's what's going to help us to go forward, I think.
Yeah, and for me, and this is what we've been talking about. Well, we meaning just a small group of colleagues here on the ground, and we talk, especially in Texas. Texas is a different kind of place when you talk about theopolitics. Okay, it is most, and this includes Black preachers in the state of Texas. They will lean into what we call a theological defense system that sanctioned enslavement, Black codes, Jim Crow segregation. So that is what's being spewed out every Sunday, right, throughout the state of Texas. And so for us, it's always how do we then bring a different type of moral clarity to what is happening and what it means to be Christian. Because a lot of people, and this would cause them to then over spiritualize and oversimplify what's going on
Mm-hmm.
when we talk about what's going on in Austin, right? Or we become single folk. I don't want to deal with reproductive justice because it's about abortion.
Mm-hmm.
And so, then it's because really it's a lot of conservative Black folk who say they liberal, but they're really conservative in the way in which they understand politics and policy and laws that they support. So for us, how we're looking at this, and to your point, Charlene, it is about, well, what can I do to maintain my seat and my power, when the reality is, what kind of power do you really have, though, other than sitting in your seat,
Yeah.
right? In the way that we see this is going, you might be in your seat and be out. Because there's
Yeah.
there's a disregard for, any kind of understanding how things, the way in which you're in your seat because you're elected, that this administration doesn't care what the rules are, right? That there are
Yeah.
ways. Go ahead. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
yeah, because man, y'all are on point, right? And the receipts don't add up. Like even when you talk about somebody being in the seat, for instance, like what have you tangibly and concretely brought back to the people, or how have you moved us in the direction of the vision that we have for a kind of safe, just, equitable environment and an improving of the quality of life? So this morning, I went to the announcement for Congress that Justin J. Pearson is about to challenge longtime U.S. Congressman, Steve Cohen. And so
Mm,
there's a lot of chatter even around that. And some of it is, and it's for me, it's like, even if you value Steve Cohen as someone who has brought some value to the ninth congressional district, and let's just say he has a solid legacy. I think his legacy is reasonably solid, right? But I don't see him being able to do anything in the next 3 to 5 years or 5 to 10 years that will somehow be an improvement on his long-standing legacy as it is. But I do see him possibly falling a victim to the same kind of rigid political politics. And when y'all were talking earlier, I was thinking maybe we need to start calling it the political industrial complex.
right.
When folks are just trying to stay in politics for so
Right.
long. And
Yeah.
we
We
seen this
see it.
really do some backlash. So I don't know if him staying in any longer is going to benefit him, but it could definitely harm him. And why not just pass the baton to somebody as robust and righteous as a Justin Pearson? And so y'all are
Yeah.
helping me think through some of the stuff on the ground in Memphis too.
Yeah, because for me, and I mean, this whole redistricting piece, I think a lot of it's now it's bad that it's happened, right? But I'm always looking for what came out of it. So some of what came out of it, people who normally weren't involved in politics, who probably didn't go downtown to City Hall, never went to Austin, decided to go this time and go to the hearings, and they started asking questions. Right? They're asking, well, why the black Democrats XYZ, or why the Democrats XYZ, or why isn't the Hispanic caucus not doing? Then now they're trying to figure out. It seems to me something should be happening here, and it's not happening, right? And I think a lot of them in those committee hearings, things come out, and they realize the whole time some of those folks have really just been down there just being able to sit in their seat the whole time. And I'm going to talk, because it's public, you can go watch it now. I know Cheryl was there. Actually, you didn't go to Austin, did you? So in this particular hearing on the bill, Hunt was the author of the bill, right, for the congressional maps. And so, the Democrats on the committee are just going in. And so the Republican Hunt, raised up in his seat, and I swear his whole Southern drawl just vexed my spirit. I said he was definitely a slave owner in another lifetime. I mean, and he pretty much read them and let us know that the maps that are still in the courts from the last time, those Democrats, he said, some of you on this committee and your other colleagues came to my office thanking me for what I did with those. So you agreed to maps in 21 you knew were unconstitutional that's still in the court. So he's really, in a way, telling everybody in this room that these very folks who are now trying to raise all this hell around this map have been about this, since 21. And he asked them, so what's your problem? And it fell silent in the room, right? So I think some of this is also, how do we get more people, because now people are asking, well, who can we get to run for office? To your point, right? So, and that's part of, that's one of the questions you received too, like, how do we really increase representation, and I'm going to say diversity of our candidates that can really reflect, but first of all, what is our vision that we already have, that the candidates can say, we want you. We can't endorse you as, as faith leaders, but you, like Reagan did to the far right. He said, you can't endorse me, but I can endorse your platform. So how do we do that and have candidates who feel like, okay, right. So when I get in office, boom, boom, almost like Project 2025, right? Just go to work on, passing legislation that impacts us and allows us to thrive. So I'm wondering how we do more of that to get more people engaged, like letting them see, just busting that process wide open, and something that's going to regard some truth telling, which is going to hurt some feelings, which means you got to call some names that you normally wouldn't call because they're quote unquote long standing. But at some point, where does not the future of your children, grandchildren, or the next generation matter enough to you, where we say, okay, you've done enough? Because there's some people sitting down in Austin who've been there since Ebenezer Johnson got into politics. 50 years you've been in this seat. But that's just my little 2 cents. But I think how do we begin to talk about that in a real way where we really start telling the truth about how we then build power, right? What I would say certainly from the bottom up. And where we just really see these seats as part of an ecosystem. It's not the end all, the be all, but it's part of a political ecosystem that we need to be more engaged in. And that getting a seat in whether it's city council, here, county commissioner, Texas State House or Congress, that's just a part in this larger ecosystem that we need to be engaged in.
Yeah, I actually want to say, for me, I think we have to even expand beyond seats, right? I want a mission for co-governance. I want people in seats, but I also want to be able to co-govern and have our people co-govern. And for us, what that means is, like, I have places in New Jersey where a legislator is not going to make a move without picking up the phone, calling one of our people or someone, because they want to know, are you going to be a problem? Is this going to fly?
Right.
We need that level of power and co-governance. And the only way that happens, and this is my best advice right now, especially for faith communities, every faith community should have an organizing team, a social justice ministry, call it whatever it is, but one that is not about just mobilizing your people to go vote, but one that's about developing your people to challenge power, right? And where they are in the rooms, they are leading the meetings, and there's something that happens in this transformation that happens with everyday people when they have interactions with those that they think are in power, right? It teaches one how to tell a liar, right? It teaches how you stand on your own and how to also do it despite being afraid, right? And bringing people together, because the people that need to take office need to be the ones, honestly, that are in our organizing meetings, and they look like everyone. If we really want the world we want, I want people who have been incarcerated to be being developed and pushed up, right? I want that single mom. I want the person who's a domestic violence survivor, those that can speak to the truth of what this world is, and developing them in order to take those seats, but also to build enough power around them that maybe they don't have the seat, but maybe they're the person that they got that gets that telephone call, right? And that
Right.
person is beholding to a community
Mm.
that they're going back to, where it's not just them making a decision. And that only happens in that deep type of organizing, I think.
And I think
I,
what
I
you
definitely applaud, I celebrate when that kind of work happens, and I think it needs to happen more often and more robustly. And I also think it is equally as important, as bad as I want a diversity in representation,
Mhm.
what I think we also need is people who are politically conscious enough
Mhm.
to leverage those spaces so that we can enact the kind of policies and practices and create the kind of environment that we actually want. And yes, in the process of engaging and enlightening and empowering community members, like you were talking about, Danielle, like you talking about, Charlene, when you are taking people to these city council meetings, county commission meetings, state legislative meetings, and they are seeing this process, and then they start asking all of these questions, and then the light bulbs start going off, and then their passions are ignited and stuff like that. Yes, we need to do that, and we need to develop the frameworks. We
Mhm.
need our congregational networks to be the places where people can workshop collective ideas and platforms so that by the time somebody is in office, you're not.
Mm.
I'm in too many rooms with too many quote unquote faith leaders that are saying to the elected official, Doc, what you need us to do. And I'm
Right.
like, what is wrong with you fools?
Right.
Like, no. See, this is the place, because when you start talking about, let's just say the project 2025 of it all, they
Mhm.
don't get to go into the room and then tell the architects of Project 2025, this is what I'm gonna do. And the architects of Project 2025 are not saying, hey, what do you need us to do? They're saying, here goes our agenda.
Mhm.
This has been vetted. We got a whole base that is ready to see this enacted. And if you end up in that seat and you don't enact this, we gonna get you out of that seat and put somebody else in there that will. And so I don't think we have seen our congregational networks or our congregations or our faith-based institutions as places where these kinds of powers can be brokered. We've seen them as places that can be mobilized, to your point earlier, Charlene, and people can be registered to vote, right, Dr. Danielle? And then yeah, that's one
That's
aspect of
right.
it. But if that's all we're doing, we're still setting our people up for a type of political exploitation,
Mhm.
such that when somebody gets in office and they do not do the things that the majority of the people in the community need them to do, they're not saying that's my candidate and we need to get them straight. They're saying that's Pastor so and so candidate, that's so and so girl or that's so and so boy. And then they pointing the fingers. And so we don't have that kind of cohesion. So we need that high level of political consciousness so that the people who are in those seats can leverage those seats
Mhm.
and do the work. And we don't always have, sometimes we do, but especially not in this moment. We don't often have time for people to learn on the job the Robert's
Right.
Rule of
Oh,
Order.
right.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So some of that, like if you don't know that stuff walking in the door, then while you sitting up there learning, then your people being cooked because you showed up at the
Mm.
table, but you were on the menu the whole time and you didn't recognize the smell of barbecued Negro because they were barbecuing Negroes when you showed up to the spot. So we need people with that kind of political consciousness, and we need to leverage our congregational networks so that we
Yeah.
can build those platforms out. And then whoever is in those offices, they already got those marching orders.
So one of the things I want to go back to, one of the things that Charlene mentioned about how you really build and organize the power, what I'm calling it on the ground level in community that get the phone calls. And I like that you said it's community, because what you don't want is have the person is the one they call, because then they become gatekeepers, right? Then they're the ones who now begin to make decisions. So I think it's so, I'm glad you said that, because that's important too, because we can tend to do that in our community. Like, oh, well, I mean, I've received phone calls before. Did you call me about XYZ? I heard you talk to X, Y, and Z. You talked to this person, but you didn't call me first. I'm like, I don't need to call you first. Because they're used to being the one that everybody reaches out to. So it's also, I feel we have to do that to make space and room for more people to be empowered to your point too, Reverend Earl, right? But to be educated on what we're doing. Like, we have a very systematic way that we're going to go about building this power. And then what it means to be in community with one another. Here are the expectations. Here's what we expect for you to be in community with each other. And when you step outside of that, how do we then correct? So we can make sure that we stay, connected and engaged. And for me, empowered and informed at all times, and how we might move forward. And then, you said something else when you were talking about developing frameworks, right? So when you talk about, I
Hmm.
tell people all the time, so by the time you opened up, downloading and read Project 2025, it was in motion. Like, right,
Hmm.
and I call this the slow work. Like, we also have to have a team of people who are doing that kind of deep thought and deep work to create, what does it look like, our vision of what does it mean to have a healthy, whole, thriving community, and what we need, so that we have something to put to your point. So if you sit down with elected officials as a faith leader, instead of saying what you need us to do, here's what we need you to do. And this is what we are holding you account. If you can't do this, it's going to be a problem. And like, really owning that power too, right? And not, kind of playing small in a sense, or what I would call just trying to, this type of humbleness, right? Where you go in, well, whatever you need us to do, we're ready. We're here to support.
Hmm.
No, we up here standing 10 toes down. We won't be knocked off our square. This is what we looking for. Like,
Man,
we,
these folks be light on their elected officials and heavy on their staff members.
sir.
You know what I'm saying? Like they will run their administrative assistant into the ground as a taskmaster. They'll run their minister of music, cat ragged, expecting and demanding all of these things, and then go to the
Mm-hmm.
elected official who is getting paid with their tax dollars and say, "What you need me to do?" It's insane. And so one of the things Up the Vote did, and Danielle, I think when you first launched Fannie Lou's Classroom is around the time I came to Dallas, when
Mm-hmm.
you hosted that convening, and I was talking about what it meant to build a platform, because Up the Vote 901
Mm-hmm.
spent several months doing a survey. We ended up with about 2,200 surveys
Mm-hmm.
leading up to one of the municipal elections in Memphis in 2019. And we took the results of that survey and we coded it into what is now known as the Memphis People's Agenda. And so there were sections where people were describing what was important to them, what they were passionate about, and what they wanted to see as it relates to the Memphis city budget, labor and wages, housing and the environment, education, and crime and public safety. And so these are things that when people are participating in what we have revived as the Memphis People's Convention,
Mm-hmm.
where people are coming trying to find endorsements for candidates who have been vetted by the people, or when they participate in the Memphis People's Summits, which are the accountability measures where we get to assess the people who have been in office and then they come and give a report of what they've been doing. We get to point back to that agenda and say, number one, if you are running for office, do you agree to implement this when you get into office in
Mm-hmm.
whatever area you can that's in your particular jurisdiction? And then when they come to the summit, we get to say, well, how did you do that? Did you do it? And why not? And so that's something that we have as a platform that's representative of a substantial number of the people of Memphis and what they wanted to see in these particular areas. But a lot of us don't have any kind of framework like that to lean on.
Yeah. Right. Charlene, did you want to comment in there?
Yeah, I think that you're dead on. And in the midst of all of that, being clear on what the consequence is if you do not, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think way too often we want to be comfortable,
Yeah.
right? We don't want to be uncomfortable. We can't make change being comfortable, y'all.
Right.
Like
Right.
have to we have to demystify the fact that change is going to come really early, and like change is going to come just because we willed it, we sat next to power, we were adjacent to it
Mm.
to get it right. Or people of faith are called to be prophets of the resistance, not chaplains to the empire. But
Ooh, come on.
all too often it is people of faith picking up the phone when somebody just got shot by the police, talking about, oh yeah, I'm gonna come stand beside you while you're trying to deliver this news to a community that has righteous rage as they should, right?
Mm-hmm.
You should be standing on the other side, talking, making demands about, no, now what are you gonna do? This was wrong. This is what happened, right? And I think that the other thing is that in having a platform, it's amazing, especially when it's grounded with the people, and the people can say this is where it came from, and they can say my story is where this came from, right? It gets you to have so many more people to move with you and to have that actual power. But also, it gets us to move to one of the things I think people are most fearful of, is dreaming. When
Mm,
you always ask people, what do you want? And when you do, they will tell you what they don't want because they understand that oppression, that something standing on your
right.
neck, right? But to dream the world that we actually deserve, that is where people have a hard time. And for us to get out of this mess that we're in right now, we have to go over that fear and get people to that dreaming place so that then people can run after something else. Because right now, what I see playing out as we're looking at authoritarianism is too many people that are outraged, mainly like white folks that are like, oh my goodness, all of a sudden now I'm hurting, that are
Mm.
fighting to get back to something that never served any of us and hurt them too before, right? So we have to get people to that dreaming place so we can say that there's something else that's better and possible, and then fight for that.
Yeah, and so I'm gonna circle back to something that, well, also to your point too, Charlene. It is the because oppression has been happening so long, we know for a fact what hurts and what we don't want. But also, just in dealing with some people in community, what we also have to help people with is getting rid of a borrowed imagination. So sometimes we
Mhm.
can't think about what we want because we're living in somebody else's world, right?
Mhm.
So it's limited, right? It's suffocating, it's disempowering, and it makes us disengaged. So it's also how do we kind of detox from that so that we can nurture and nourish our imagination to even think about, what does it like to flourish for you. So that's something I always talk about when I'm facilitating any kind of workshop, especially with faith people, because sometimes they don't know that there actually is, there is, and for them it's more of a a borrowed prophetic imagination, right? They're thinking about what it means to what God, who is God in the world, from somebody else's worldview that does not be a Western worldview that does not benefit them. And then Reverend Earl, I want to, because this is always a thing we have. I know that I don't know the answer to this. I have some answers, but
You got the answer.
uh,
I
but
know better.
but to your point about when it comes to Black faith leaders, when we go into these rooms of quote
Hmm.
unquote power, and we just looking to be, tell us what you want. I'm thinking back to the Secretary of War. I think it was Secretary Stanton when he went to some Black clergy and they
Hmm.
wanted to find out what do you want for those who are in the rebel states when the Emancipation Proclamation is issued. You know
Hmm.
what they
That's how
said?
they got the 40 acres in the minute.
Correct. They said we want land and we want to control our labor. They also
Hmm.
said, right, that we will enlist our folks to fight in this war, but we want to be the ones who recruit them and say who
Hmm.
goes into war. And they said we want to live separate from white people, right? They were very, and I'm
Hmm.
saying that to say they were clear on what they wanted when asked. They didn't say, well,
Hmm.
what would you like for us to have? So I'm
Right.
wondering, somewhere in here we lost that. And just from because you are, you're all things, but you're also a pastor. So you
Yeah.
you you also have to talk to other, pastors as well. And I'm just wondering what where can we begin to turn the corner where Black pastors really see they do have power, and it requires them to use their imagination to think on these things. So when they go into spaces, they're clear about what the ask is and what they're demanding.
Yeah, one of the books I always teach in a lot of my undergraduate religious studies courses is Black Religion and Black Radicalism,
Mm,
because it kind of charts this path of how Black churches started out as hubs of Black liberation and transformation, especially all the way through, maybe, I think the author argues, all the way through Bishop Henry McNeil Turner. And then at the turn of the 18th century into the 19th, no, at the turn of the 19th century into the 20th century, what you ended up having was people who were captivated much more by the conversations of W.E.B. Du Bois and um, Booker T. Washington. Right. And so he calls it the de-radicalization of the black church.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we've been living in the remnants of that
Mm.
for, over the last 100 years because people can't see as explicitly the integrated nature of politics and theology. And they think they're actually doing black folks a favor by saying stuff like, we don't mix politics and religion.
Mm-hmm.
Fool, yes, you do. And the reason you don't want to do it is because you've borrowed the imagination of an enslaver that was telling you it would not be in your best interest to do that. And so I think that's part of the psychology, the
Mm-hmm.
political psychology and the theological psychology that we have to push back against. And the other sad thing about this is because this is primarily about power and that most of us have not been cultivated in a space that taught us how to obtain, maintain, and sustain and leverage that power, then we are surrendering it and thinking we're doing our people and maybe even our God a favor.
Mm.
So you don't know how to hold people in positions of power and authority accountable. You
Yeah.
think your responsibility is to be subservient to them and that the benefit is the privilege of being in close proximity to them.
Mm.
And so I remember several years ago having a conversation because I was trying to hold the previous mayor accountable for some statements and some actions that they were supposed to be involved in. And the mayor was real strategic and always trying to convene a particular group of faith leaders, and many of whom would not necessarily hold him accountable. And I would always hear about it because some of the folks in that realm would be reaching out to me. Doc, did they reach out to you? No, y'all know he didn't reach out to me. Well, let me tell you what's going on. And then I had one of the faith leaders call me and he said, "You ain't the only prophet in town." And I said, "Yeah, and I ain't never said that I was, but I do know
Right.
this. Just
Mm.
because you are sitting in the room with the king does not make you a prophet. Just
Correct.
because you tell the king a lovely story does not make you a prophet. You ain't going to be a prophet until you're willing to tell the king, thou art the man."
That's right.
And so we don't have enough people
Mm.
who have cultivated that kind of courage because they
Mm-hmm.
don't necessarily see that as the way that they are supposed to leverage their particular power. They think it's much more about being in privilege and proximity. As long as they invite me to the prayer breakfast, as long as I
Right.
get a slot at the inauguration, and then if I get those things, or if they call up on me for quote unquote wise counsel, then I'm in good space. But if you cannot use that proximity to produce something for your people that is beneficial and uplifting and progressive, then what do you even have that for? But most of our people love to be in leadership positions, even when they don't have the leadership capital or the leadership cachet or the leadership character and consciousness to make the leadership work for the people.
Whew, Brooke, yes, we got to go. It's been right. It's been, y'all been dropping a lot of heat today. One of the things I try to do in the classroom, we use language, is try to define that for people, and I try to do that as we go. And I just thought about a couple of things we were throwing
Yeah,
around. So the one thing
sure.
I want to define for people, how you all would define Black political power. What does that mean when we say Black political power?
Charlene, I said a lot. You want to go or else I could
You
tackle it, but
you can go
okay.
first and then I'll go.
Okay, cool. So simply when you start talking about black anything, it should be centered in the black experience and not just a particular or small group of black folks. But when you start thinking about average, everyday, ordinary black folks, how do you center their experience? And when you start thinking about power, it is the capacity to get something done. So if you talk about black political power, how do people who have centered themselves in the black experience use politics and the political process to leverage the power to get something done on behalf of those black folks? That's how I define black political power.
All right.
Absolutely. I couldn't say that better. And it includes everybody.
Uh huh.
Everybody. It is Black poor folks. It is Black educated folks. It is Black trans folks. It is everyone being able to actually make the things happen that they choose to make happen. Like that is what power is. You don't have power if you can't make change. So,
Mm-hmm.
how you measure it, honestly.
Yeah, no, thank you all for that. I just realized that because that can mean a lot of things to a lot of different people. So I always like to be able to define some things that we are, terminology that we're using. So I want to take the
And it's
last.
easier to understand it when people stop being so scared of saying black in public.
Ooh, come on, that part, right?
Yeah. And you know what? I think there's something that needs to be demystified too, right? Because people don't like to be uncomfortable. And some of it is, well, if I say this, if
Mm,
I do this, I'm not going to sit at this table. And that's not true. You know how many times I've made my governor mad, but I go to
Mhm.
his holiday party? Like,
mm-hmm.
if you have power, power will be respected. It is the
That's
currency
right.
that we have in the public arena, and you will not build power if you are not willing to risk something
That's
and if
right.
you are not willing to cause tension. And I think that when we think about faith-based organizers, right, part of the responsibility of faith-based organizers is to create the conditions so that people have experiences
Mhm.
to actually make those tensions, to learn,
Mhm.
oh wait, nothing horrible happened, I'm
Right.
still here, so that you can grow and take bigger risk and bigger risk. And in the middle of what we are in right now,
Huh.
we need everybody to be at a place where they are willing to take risk if we're going to be able to push back on all this authoritarianism.
All right. Yeah. It is all going to calculated risk too, right? This is what has to happen. And I'm thinking about this. As an example to what you're saying about you just have to be your authentic self. Well, first you got to know yourself first. I mean, that's number one. But I've seen it, and I'll just use this person's example because I've seen it over the past 20 plus years, and that's my pastor.
Mhm.
He's gonna say what he gonna say. I don't care where he is, right? And who's listening. And I've seen where others who may be a little more timid, and to your point, I don't know if I want to say this. Will they not like me? Will this, will I risk not being invited here, or how would I be viewed? And I've seen where he's walked into rooms with those people, but the people who are quote unquote power, they tend to then lean more into Doc, like, oh wait a minute, don't cut his mic
Mhm.
off, let him keep talking. It's almost as
Mhm.
if I know if I don't handle this one right, something's gonna come behind it. Like he has people with him. And I think we have to lean into that because it is there. And this is what I try to tell a lot of people of faith. You just use your voice. What they say, tell the truth even if your voice shakes. You
Mhm.
have to just do that, and just whatever happens, happens, right? You have to, but if you believe in what you're doing and you believe it's righteous, you have to just speak your truth. And it is that simple, right? You just have to be willing to have the courage, that prophetic courage to do that. And that's what I try to tell people all the time. Don't worry about how it sounds when it comes out. You just have to say it. And don't worry about the outcome if you know that you are speaking truth and this is what you've been called to do. And I just think that's what's missing for a lot of people. And I coach people through that. And now some people love to go down and say what they want
Mhm.
to say and give testimony, but they just weren't sure.
Mhm.
And I said, I don't care if they look at you like you crazy the whole time you talking. You look them dead in their face and say every last word, right?
Mhm.
Just don't. It's like almost like you can't be afraid of the faces, as the text tells us, and
Yes.
you just have to be able to do that. So thank you for saying that because I think that is something it's all of us, right? And it never fails. I don't care how quote unquote more advanced you get in this work, it's always going to be risk of faith and us trying to see, do I take this move, do I make this
Mhm.
move? And I think the more you do it, the more you see, yes, it's going to be backlash sometimes, but other times, it won't be. And that's why you just
Mhm.
have to stay true to who you are. And I love that you gave your testimony, and you make the governor mad all the time, but you go to the parties. Why? Because he's like, I can't alienate Charlene because I know what comes with that. Like she
Mhm.
brings a certain kind of power with her, and she's not alone. Right. And I think that's the biggest thing is why we have to do organizing, why we have to build community, because we can't be out there by ourselves. And you don't want to be out there by yourself. Um,
And there's a certain type of timidity that people bring to
mm-hmm,
those spaces, thinking that
mm,
what those people in positions of political power actually desire are sycophants like what Trump has. But there's a lot of elected officials
mm-hmm,
who really want people who are going to stand on business,
mm-hmm,
especially when they have proven that they actually know what they're talking about. I was in a room with the current mayor, group of faith leaders. And he said in front of all of them, I'm gonna tell y'all what I appreciate about Dr. Fisher. I know he gonna tell me what he really thinking. And I know he's done some research to know what he's talking about.
mm-hmm.
And so, no, you don't have to pander to them. And it's a
Right.
shame because people think that that's the strategy
Mm,
of being affirmed by them. But in a lot of instances, the people who are doing the pandering are the people who have the least amount of
That's
respect
right.
from some of these elected officials.
That's right. That's right. That's why I think it's so important to push that right and to say you have, in my opinion, is always we have nothing to lose at this point.
But our chains.
That's it. Like we have no. Listen, it's it's been game on, but right now, I think some people, I'm noticing more people, and I'll say this in the city of Dallas, some of our faith leaders who never ever have anything to say, right? They're like, what are y'all doing? What can we do? We don't know what to do, but we want to learn. Like, because now I think some people are starting to wake up and see, like, we're in trouble, right? So I think, yeah, I just think it's so much work for us to do. A lot of good work is happening, but we still have a ways to go. And that's why I want to keep having these kind of conversations so people can really begin to think and see, like, it's possible. Listen to you and Reverend Fisher, I think they can see, hey, okay, it's possible. And it's something that's doable. It's not something that you have to have a PhD in, right? It's about, do you have the courage, conviction, and commitment to be true to this work? And if you do, you can learn as you go. There are people there. That's the beauty of organizing. We do this together. We are in community. You're not doing it alone. And so that's why I wanted to start this conversation on today. We'll continue this with some other guests, but I wanted you all to kick it off because I respect all the work that you do so much, and I respect you as human beings, as comrades in this struggle, and I wanted your voices to be the ones that kind of kick us off in this conversation, and one that I use ongoing as I do a lot of the organizing work that we do here on the ground. To hear your voices is so important. So as always, time goes fast when you're having fun and with good people. So I want to thank you, Reverend Dr. Earle Fisher, PhD, my brother in Memphis, and Sister Charlene Walker. Thank you so much for being here today. We really appreciate you sharing all of your wisdom and your knowledge transfer that happened here today. You know, you brought a lot of bricks to the table on today, so something was starting to get built here. So we so appreciate all you had to offer. So as always, we want to encourage you to purchase a Family Classroom t-shirt. This allows us to bring amazing guests like Dr. Fisher, like Sister Charlene Walker to the classroom so they can share their knowledge with us. And so, you know, as they say, everything is not free. We got to be able to support and be able to do the work that we do to bring this knowledge to you. So please, if you see on the screen, you can scan the QR code, or you can go to friendshipwest.org, Justice page, and you will see a link for you to order your t-shirt. And stay tuned because tomorrow, this week, 1 week, I don't know. Next time we go live, you will be able to see the new merchandise is going to drop, and so you have some opportunities to support us in some other ways. We have some variety of t-shirts and other goods for you to choose from, so we look forward to you supporting us there. So our next week's episode is going to be cultivating a circle of care for Black mothers. So this episode is going to discuss how we build circle of care that lends to mothers birthing and blooming. As you know, Black women are 3 to 4 times more likely to die as a result of giving birth. And as I always say, it has nothing to do with our ability to conceive, carry, and give birth, but it's everything to do with the fact that our bodies have never been seen as fully human from the antebellum period to this very moment, that there are direct correlations with that. So we're going to have a conversation around that on next week. And lastly, we're in the throes of our holiday drive for Haynes Global Preparatory Academy on the campus of Paul Quinn College. So you can stop by the Northex if you're at Friendship West to pick up a card to support one of our children. You owed everybody as a child, but our high school students for their wish list for the Christmas holidays. And of course, we support the school year round, not just at Christmas. We're engaged in any policy matters that impact not only HGP but DISD, but also we help the teachers, administrators, and the students and their families by extension by providing for households and needs that they may have. So we're super excited at least to be in our holiday drive. So you can give a contribution by scanning the QR code, and you can, if you're on site, you can stop by the table in the Northex and pick up a card, but also a list of all of the hygiene products that the school needs and all the things our children need as they come to school, where they can feel good about themselves when they show up, that they have all that they need to thrive at Haynes Global Preparatory Academy. So thank you for joining us on this week's episode of Family's Classroom, and we look forward to seeing you next week right here in the classroom.
From the church house.